Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Talk on Tech. I am Patrick Smith, and it's been a minute. I was talking here that I think it's been 6 years since I've done one of these, an official Talk on Tech podcast, but we're in a new recording studio here, and hopefully more of these to come. But I had the opportunity to talk to one of my former professors and former colleagues and entice him to come on the podcast. So today, welcome Jack Locher. How are you, Jack?
I'm good. I'm in retirement now, so I'm kind of enjoying that.
I looked back, and I don't think we ever technically talked on the audio podcast before. Like, I had talked to Rhonda and Kim and a lot of people, but when I thought about that, I was like, oh, I have so many pieces that I want to talk about. And also, I kind of put the call out to former students to say, hey, you got any fun memories or things you want to talk about? So I got a couple of those too for you.
Okay.
But, I always find people's trajectory into IT and where they come from interesting because it helps demystify for people that, sometimes people are born with a keyboard in their hand, but sometimes it's a long and winding road and you wind up there and there's happy accidents along the way. So, what's on your trajectory to being a faculty member and stuff here? Where's the first stops for Jack? Like at first when you were in high school, middle school, stuff like that, were you looking towards computers? Were you looking towards electronics? Like what was the plan then for you?
At that time, I was basically doing accounting. First few years of the military, I was in accounting. I was stationed in Washington, D.C., working out of what they call the Forstall building down by the Smithsonian. Spent a couple of years there, got married, and went overseas. And there, the accounting was fine. I was a number person, but it just wasn't exciting enough to me. I wanted something different, so I got the opportunity to do some additional duties in what they would call NBC, nuclear biology chemical at the time, and I started that, and I really enjoyed it. So then I switched over to that field completely, got out of the accounting, and I spent the next 22 and a half years, so out of the 25-year career, 22 and a half years I spent in that field. And I was going to spend the next 5 more years till retirement at 30, but I got in a traffic accident. I was hit by a drunk driver, and it ended my military career at that time. And so it was fortuitous in such way that I got to come back, and I was able to take care of my parents in their older age, my mother-in-law. So nothing, I enjoyed everything that happened. But when I came back here, I had, in the last, since the early 80s to the time I got out, I worked with Macintosh, the Apple Macintosh, the Apple IIes, all those types. And that's what I learned on, and that's what, because I found out even though the military and the government was using Windows for specialized graphics, things like that, I was one of the vice presidents of the Macintosh user group in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so when the injury happened and everything like that, and I got sent, retired and came back here, I decided I wanted to try to stay in that field because I could no longer wear a protective mask and suit because I was going to retire and go into the plants that are around here, chemical plants.
Right.
So when I went back to Marshall, I already had my degree, but I wanted to learn the new graphics and everything like that. And they only had one class on graphic art with Mac. And I found out that the only graphic artist type jobs around were with Herald Dispatch and one other advertising companies, and they were already filled,
Right.
Once you get into it, you never leave it.
A lot of people, but only a couple positions.
Right, and that's kind of what, but I took the class, enjoyed it. And then I figured out, well, I already know how to use the Windows machines because I taught that in the military also, just because they were so similar. If you could do a Mac, you could do a Windows easily,
right?
Type setup. Because at that time, Windows are going graphics where you could use a mouse, you could do point and click, where it started out that way with Macs.
Right.
So I was already comfortable with that.
Well, I'm curious about something for a second. So you said the military wasn't using Macs as much. It makes sense. Because I was wondering on the accounting side, like I know for some history, like I think VisiCalc was like the first accounting stuff. So when you were doing the accounting stuff for the military, no mainframes, it wouldn't have been workstations, I guess. Like, were you doing when was your first computer experience, I suppose?
First computer experience was personal type computers.
Sure.
Would have been in early 80s.
Because you mentioned you started on the Mac. So then I wondered, and even when you said when you had the accident, you're like, you were pivoting there. I was wondering how computers potentially got into that mix. So I thought you might have had a personal one. If for some reason, if the government didn't have Macs, was your first one your Mac?
No, the first one was really a TRS-80.
Mm-hmm.
When I was mid-career or right after I got switched fields and everything like that, I was tapped to come back as a recruiter. And one of the things that I noticed that they had no way of really keeping good records and making things easier, like mailing lists, things like that. So Radio Shack had come out with the TRS-80, and they had some easy software programs to make labels, printers, things like that. So I bought one of those, and I learned how to keep databases. And I would go to the schools, and I says, I'll make you a list of addresses, and so you can do mailing lists and everything like that.
That's cool.
So I kind of traded my skill at that to get information and everything like that. But it was public available type information.
Right.
They just didn't have. They were still writing out names and things like that. So I showed them how. I gave them how to get a database list and things like that. So that wasn't Windows at that time, but it was the beginning of the computers.
Gotcha.
And then I went to Panama, and while I was down there, the Macs started coming out, Apple and Macs and everything like that. And I purchased my first Apple Mac computer at that time. And like I had said earlier, that one cost me close to $7,000. And at that time, that was...
And was that officially a Mac? So we're talking at least
that was
80,
a Mac.
84. Because 84 is when
84.
the Macintosh came out.
That was the first iteration of the Mac. I mean, the screen was, it was very, very, very small. But I used that, like I said, military wasn't using those types of computers at the time. So in my position as an operations NCO, I was responsible for doing presentations and things like that. And in Panama, we had a base on the Pacific coast and one on the Atlantic coast. I was on the Atlantic side. But every month we had to go do a briefing of everything we had done and everything like that on the Pacific coast. So I was doing, quote, PowerPoint slides at that time. And there was no graphics. There was nothing that really showed. There was just lines and everything. Mm-hmm. So with my Mac, I started, putting images in there and things like that. So I became the perfuncto person that started making those presentations. And I used to have to fly over and do those presentations and everything and prepare them.
Knowing where we're going, knowing that you were my professor at one point, you made a comment, off mic at lunch that I want to hit upon, because it wouldn't have been something that I would have ever figured out. But you mentioned, and you've mentioned you had to give presentations. You mentioned you had to do the officer school. You mentioned that you were, somewhat deathly afraid of public speaking and stuff. So talk about a trajectory, knowing where you got to, like, and people's roads being all different. Like, can you talk about how you became a professor? If at one point where did the gray area go from black and white to like, I don't want to stand in front of an audience, to where I'm giving presentations in Panama or I'm teaching students in a class?
When I was in DC, when I was an accountant, there was 3 military accountants and all the rest were civilians. So for a lot of the presentations that we had to present, and at this time we're talking about the computers I worked with there were not workstations. They were 80 punch cards, and we would have to fill them out and have them punched out and then run them through the computers at night. And these mainframes took up half this floor.
So I mean, if you like an old movie where like there's a computer as big as your house or larger,
right?
And like you say, for people that don't know punch cards, if you've ever gone to the library and they have the little thing in the back of the book, the long piece of paper, or think about your phone, they would take your phone and they would punch different things in there, and that was an easy shorthand. So you all didn't have to flip zeros and ones like on an Altair, for example, right?
We'd have to change a big motherboard or breadboard, basically, and it was about 2 foot by 2 foot, and that would tell it whether this process of all these cards are going to be a subtraction, addition, so on like that. So that's what took so long every night. So all the businesses, all the military businesses and accounting that came in, we had to convert it from paper and then code it into a punch card for the operators to punch it in and everything like that, and then it'd run every night. So, it was a long process of doing all this. But at that time, I was required to present as on the military side. So there was only 3 of us. I had the highest rank at the time, and so it started bothering me. So I went and talked to the command and everything like that, and they gave me some help on learning. And as long as I was talking about something that I knew or I was passionate about or something like that, I didn't have problems talking to people. But when I had to stand up and just talk off the cuff, that was some problems. And a lot of times in the meetings, there was off the cuff type questions and things. So that would kind of get to me. So I did that. And gradually I started more people, went from like rooms of 12 to 20 to Panama 200 to things like that. So by the time I got retired and came back here, it was, I still didn't like going that way with a lot of people, but when it was something that I was passionate about or something like that. So when I came back here and was given the opportunity to start teaching adjunct, it was something that I liked, because before it was subjects that were hobbies, and like the A+ class, the introduction to networking classes, those things that I had learned from like my time with the Mac user group. We built networks and everything like that. And at that time, Cisco was just kind of coming in and taking over, and we were getting crates of computers coming in. And what bugged me about it is they would bring in computers and drop them on a secretary's desk or an admin's desk or something like that, and there was no training. And so we kind of grouped together and tried to teach people just the basics of logging in. Basically, your introduction classes, 101 class, IT 101 class, that type of things. But to have someone to
in the military, you're doing that?
This is in the military, and
that's when you're taking. That's when you're taking. Okay.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, they're dropping these on these people, and they're expecting to know. Even just most of them knew how to type already, which was a good thing. But they didn't know how to use a computer or what it was all about. So we had to take the time, and we made impromptu classes with them.
So is that before the car wreck?
Yes.
Well, because what I was thinking about in my head, I was kind of like, Jack's in the military. By default, he's not doing anything with computers. You mentioned you were in Japan when you did the Mac user group, and I'm like, okay, well then you were stationed over there, so you had a Mac while still in the military, and so it was probably a hobby for you at that point.
Right.
You were a bit of a hobbyist, and so this even kind of adds more to that. Now you see people that don't have the training you have because they don't have one at the house. You're starting to help them with that as well. So, because I was going to say, when you had the car wreck and you had the accident and suddenly you're like, what do I do now? It seemed like that was already starting to grow as a passion in your back pocket.
It was. Like I said, I came back and I was going to take the graphics course and then try to get a job with graphic art. My last 6 months in Japan, the command let me, because I had appointments for medical, for discharge and everything like that. But they said, because when I went over there, I'd left and gone from the Sergeant Major's Academy. I just graduated Sergeant Major Academy, went to Japan to take the Sergeant Major's position. And that's where what my position was for the 17th Area Support Group, which was Japan, Korea, and so all the logistics with that. So the last 6 months, while they brought in somebody to replace me and everything like that. But it took almost 2.5 years for them to process me after the accident. So
wow.
I was being treated because they thought they could
rehabilitate you and get you back up. Yeah,
never could. So the last 6 months, I went to work for Stars and Stripes. And I was a graphic artist on their magazine for the Stars and Stripes for Asia.
Oh, wow.
And everything like that. So I learned a lot of graphic arts, layouts, things like that. So that's why when I got back, I thought, this is a way that I could still continue on and work and everything like that.
And that tracks even today. We have students come in here who are veterans and they say, here's what my MOS was and this branch or whatnot. And what can I take here to where I can start doing this in civilian life? So that makes sense as to why you were looking the graphic design publication routes.
And that's, but like I said, like you had said earlier too, had a lot of people for a few jobs and figured out that no, it wasn't going to work. So I went back and started looking at, I like computers, love computers. At that time I had 8 different computers. So, it was a hobby, but it was something that I was comfortable with. So I started looking at the IT programs for Marshall at that time. So I started with the DOS class that everybody was required to take. Mm-hmm. And because of Macs, I already basically knew code for that because teaching the new computers come in, that was the first iterations of Windows. So you had to know how to do DOS, to do formatting, things like that. So I was taking the class because it was required.
Like you just said, you had already been helping all the civilians that now had PCs dropped on their desks to understand how to use a computer. So like all this stuff, you could have done this in your sleep.
Right. But there was no test out like we can do now or give them credit for. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't anything in their military records that would show that, I was already qualified type thing like we do now for students.
Well, because that wasn't official. This was above and beyond. You were just helping out.
Right. So when I took the class, I started first couple of weeks, and then I knew enough that the instructor, when you do something that's brand new for people, that's hands-on, you need a lot of people to help. So I started helping with the class with that. And following that class, I went ahead and did the networking or the A+ class, which I'd built my own computers and everything like that. That first year, I ended up getting my A+ certifications for not just PCs, but I was one of the few that got the certification for repair of Macs at the time.
I remember you had, I think it's called the ACE, right? Apple Certified Expert or something like that, or ACT.
Well, no, it was A+ for Macs. So they used to have they had the software, hardware for A+, and that just gave you but you could take a special test for Macintoshes, and then I did that. So I got the 3 A+ versus the normal 2. And then I went ahead and got my MCSE certifications at that time.
So at this point, when you say you're helping out, are you a student in the class who they're just like, you know this, Jack, will you go help them while I'm helping someone here type of thing?
That's kind of how it started, but that was a summer and one semester. And then they asked me if I wanted to help start teaching, and I started out with A+ repair because they were having difficulties for the repair class. They couldn't get anybody to kind of work on weekends and things like that for people that's the only time they could come and all. So I was free, I didn't have a job at the time, so I took that, and then I added the additional classes of IT 101. I did that, and then Randy Jones, one of the professors, started the CCNA program, and so I started in his class. And after the first class, he asked me if I wanted to start helping him teach that class and everything like that, and I eventually got to start teaching the train-the-trainers courses with him, and got my teaching certification from Cisco, so I could legally teach the class by myself and things like that. So, it started out just as a fluke, I guess you could call it, but it was something that I know. It wasn't my primary goal of a job, but I think the teaching I enjoyed. Anytime that you can help somebody learn something, that's my father was a assistant principal and shop teacher and everything like that. So teaching was something that he was proud of and everything like that. And so when I got the position of teaching, even if it was adjunct for many years, he was kind of proud of it. He's proud of my military, but he knew how I felt about teaching because even in the military, I taught tech escort EOD, and as a first sergeant and things like that, you're always teaching something. So it just become kind of second nature. But like I said, you're always comfortable with something you know. It's just difficult to teach things that you're not sure of. Mm-hmm. And I always try to tell the students, I says, the only difference between an instructor and a student is the instructor's made that mistake already. I mean, you just haven't made it yet.
Right.
And as long as you can just keep on going and learn from the mistake, and to get to see that they learned from that or learned from their mistake, that's the best thing you can do as an instructor.
I remember I graduated high school in the summer of '98. So I originally, during my senior year, was taking classes, and I was looking at CSD or looking at MIS at the time. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about the community college. And so I went through that, and I took some economics classes and knocked out some English classes, some math classes. But then one of my friends from high school, Ryan Satterfield, was like, you should come to the community college. Like, we're touching a computer every single day. And so in the fall of '98, I was taking 120. It's probably similar to the IT 120 you had. Ann Todd was teaching it, and it was a whole DOS class, which was cool because I learned to make batch files, and so that really helped me because it's kind of like dipping my toe in programming. Rhonda Scragg was teaching a Visual Basic 6 class, and I was in IT 131, which happened to be the first Cisco class, and you were teaching that. And so Randy was in there, but I'm guessing at that time you had done the train the trainer for the first class, because the next semester, which would have been like spring of 99, I figure, Randy taught semester 2.
Right.
So you weren't teaching the other ones yet, but that was the first time that I met you. I think at one point I was talking to Ryan, because later I take Scott's MCSE classes, and I was like, did you ever meet Scott beforehand? I heard he taught 270, like the A+. And I'm pretty sure he said that he had you for the 270, because back then A+ was 2 3-hour classes. There was a 270 and 276. And in the back, I never took those. I guess maybe from where I took all the MCSEs, they just plugged in the gaps. But I also thought that at that time, even when Tommy Kelly was teaching them, they were out at the Cowboy County Career Technical Center, or maybe they moved out there.
They moved out there.
So was that, where were you having to do them?
I taught in Corley Hall.
Okay.
So it was that little double room that we had there, side by side.
The one with the raised floor.
Yeah.
333. Yep. That was on the 3rd floor, like that giant, well, it used to be an old
data center.
Yeah, the data center, yeah.
So I taught out of there. But when you start, 98 was when, because summer of 96, early 97 is when I was basically a student, but just helping out. Late 97 was when they first hired me. I started teaching the A+. Then I started teaching the CCN, or did the CCNA, and they had me for the train the trainer. You take the class, but then you go to train the trainer. They go over do the same class from the teacher's side of the house. Mm-hmm. So you're right. Basically, I'd certified for the first class to teach, and then I had to do the second and the third, something like that.
Right.
But it was kind of like, well, you still do it, and every other professor does it here. We don't get really summer and Christmas breaks. We go away to training, because our fields in IT change every 6 months.
Yeah.
And if we're not up to date on that, then the students come in and they ask questions that we can't answer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but let me check and I'll get back with you. There's nothing wrong with that as a teacher, instructor, or professor, but you need to be able to keep up to date with it. And back then in the 90s, 96, 7, something like that, it was one type of class. Like we said, DOS. When I took it over, I says, no, there's things coming out like Linux. So that's when I decided to do a combination of DOS and Linux together. We would learn Windows and then learn the same commands in Linux. Because at that time, you had many, many computer majors that were doing Linux, not Windows, because it was open source code. It was freedom to them. They could write what they want and everything like that. They were able to do things. So we taught them. I felt that I needed to teach them both. And that was one of the things when I did my class is you had to do, the installation. You had everything you did for a Windows machine, you had to do the same commands for the Linux machine. You had to learn them both. And I just felt it made a better, over-rounded student.
No, I agree. I mean, at that time, I never took the class Operating Systems 2. Like I took 120, but I think I had heard at one point, maybe Phil Smith, someone was teaching Unix. Back when they had like a Unix mainframe. Yep. I didn't have the opportunity to touch that. I was not lucky enough to have your 120. So I never touched Linux till Red Hat later on personally. But I do remember from teaching here and and talking to you, I remember seeing your hands-on funnel, which is really cool. Because, to give everybody out there an idea, you would make them install both operating systems, create a user, create folders for them. I think you had them install a web server on both ends, and they had to build a show web page. So everything they were doing in one, they were doing in the other. And, as of a couple of years ago, before we had the cybersecurity degree track, that was where they could have gotten the Linux information. Well, because, I'm MCSE, that M stood for Microsoft, and so it was a bunch of Microsoft I was doing.
Yeah, and that was the thing. At that time, you had Unix, but Unix was locked down by a corporation, basically. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't a business, then you didn't get exposed to Unix. You didn't use Unix at home. Windows, you used at home. Linux, you used at home. Those were personal computers. That's where the people learned on. And by doing that, we had students come back and says, look, I found this program for Linux that's free, that does the same thing that Windows does for the student, and it doesn't cost a student anything. So we would always kind of put that stuff out there to the student because cost is, the bottom line for a lot of students, whether they can continue on to the next semester. So if you could save them, get an old, and what's good about Linux is you get an older computer, 286, 386 type older computers, and put Linux on it, and it would run faster than what Windows with the new 486 type computer, So it was giving new life to old stuff, but it was saving students so much money too. So,
when I was coming through, you were only at the time certified for semester one of the CCNA because then Randy taught the second one. So, past that track, I know that you eventually got all 4 semesters certified, and I know that we had a security option. So I think Sherry came on board. So how did that grow from the 131 you were teaching with me, the 270 you had done? Like when you got on, were you full time when I was in my 131 class you were teaching?
I was full time, but still adjunct. That was kind of the thing. I spent a couple of years just doing what we call part time. Mm-hmm. And then they brought me on as full-time, gave me an office. So, I was adjunct, but I had an office, contacts, everything like that, but not the title per se.
So how did your technology knowledge grow? You were doing A+, because you'd gotten your A+. Mm-hmm. You were starting down the Cisco path. I know inevitably it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, what all did they have you teaching at that point?
A lot of it was, all the IT classes. I was teaching or could teach all the IT classes there was except for Unix, which they dropped eventually. But, I would either step in for an overflow or a replacement, things like that. So I guess I was I had full-time load, but I was also a floater or could step in and help. And I learned from that.
In the baseball world, you could be a pinch hitter.
Yeah. That's, we've run into it here that we have someone scheduled to teach something, and at the last minute, something happens, personal, medical, whatever, and we have to fill that position. Well, by being kind of all-rounded, you're able to step in and cover that class, even though it adds more to your load. And a normal load is, 15 hours per se, and you've gone up to 30-some hours before?
30. 30 was my breaking point.
Yeah, so, that's a double shift, position, everything like that. But if you kind of love the teaching, it's you do it, but there is sacrifice for it.
I was an adjunct for many years. I think I graduated from Marshall Community College in December 2001. And I think fall 2002, Rhonda was like, hey, how about you teach a 101 class, an introduction to computers. So I kind of got my feet wet there, teaching Word, Excel, PowerPoint, making web pages. And then, opportunities would come along. And this is always like a lesson I say out there for people when they're hearing these stories and these trajectories. When an opportunity comes along, if at all possible, do your best to say yes. Don't overtax yourself because you never know when that's going to pay off down the road. But I remember at one point they had a professor teaching databases and he'd stepped away and she said, this is a class that's on Access. At the time I was working for a contracting company where I had been doing PHP and MySQL. So talk about me getting into Red Hat. The reason I was in Red Hat is because I was doing LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And I said, can I change it to MySQL? And she goes, yeah, I just wanted it to be a database. So one semester I taught 3 classes I'd never taught before. I taught 224, which was the advanced web page. I had taken Kim Priest's. At the time when she had done it, she was doing JavaScript. Okay. So, but also that was not the JavaScript we have these days. That JavaScript was making a ticker go across the top of your web page or was putting a clock on there. And so I taught PHP because I've been doing it, doing my consulting position in the database class. I taught MySQL. And she said, can you do Visual Basic? And I was like, yeah, I took your Visual Basic class years ago, Rhonda. So I taught 215, which was advanced Visual Basic. And I managed to marry in the database stuff there where they could connect. Yeah. And, walking into those classrooms, it wasn't like I could do it with my eyes closed. Oh. But I already loved the field at that point. And the most fun thing was when we got stuck on a coding problem at Barbersville at my boss's house. We'd drive up to Borders. He'd get him a coffee. I'd go get a couple books, and we'd sit over there in the coffee house reading books of Borders and then putting them back, which might explain why Borders is not around because everybody was treating it like a library. But it was a cool, fun challenge because I was like, hey, this is something I want to learn if I don't know it. But and you never know where those opportunities are going to land you because you make a connection. A couple years later, Rhonda's like, you're great. Your reviews are great. We are considering hiring a full-time person. I want to give you a heads up that I think you should apply. Can't guarantee you'll get it, but I think you would do great. And, that led up to the summer of 2007, shaking Dr. Catronia's hand, starting fall semester at that point. So it became a full-time position. And, like you mentioned your dad was an assistant principal. My mom was in the school system. I always used to joke she would leave the school as I would get into it. But in elementary school, she was a substitute music teacher. Mm-hmm. She knew how to play the piano and their piano teacher had gotten pregnant and wanted to go on maternity leave. So she subbed in there, and then she moved up to the middle schools doing special education. By the time I got to the middle school, she moved to the high school. By the time I moved to the high school, she moved to the Board of Education. But, I'd already seen the teaching stuff there. So I imagine some of that probably for me, I saw that, I modeled that, I like that idea. So yeah, when I was in Scott's classes for the Microsoft, we each remember it differently, and I don't know which way it happened, but I do remember in my mind, a lot of people didn't read their books that day when they came to class, and Scott was asking questions, and he wasn't getting any answers, and so I was answering stuff, and I think at that point, myself and Marcia Davis were answering questions, and he's like, anybody else besides these two? And in my mind, he was like, well, since you actually read, why don't you come up here and tell them about it? And so whichever way it happened, at some point he did bring us up there, and I did get to teach a section on something. And I was like, I like this. Like, I like being able to feel confident about the knowledge I know and put it out there. And so, yeah, I mean, that kind of gave me the bug. And so when Rhonda said, would you like to adjunct for us? It wasn't a question. I was like, yeah, this would be fantastic. I would love to be able to teach this stuff. The extra money is cool, but it's also being able to teach somebody else something you already know and hopefully see the light bulb go off for them.
That is really kind of the way that it starts for, I think, any teacher, professor. You want people to get the new information, be able to ask questions to you, and you learn just as much from them as you do giving them information. I don't know how many times students have brought up a subject or brought up something that made me think or made me go back and look to see if a new way of doing things. And we had talked earlier with Zane, and we had mentioned that one of the things that on tests, especially in the IT field, the result is what we're looking for. We teach you one way of doing it. If you can find a better, faster, safer way of doing something, then you can still get the correct answer or result, then that's where you go. But you're teaching them to think outside the box, and that may give them bonuses, promotions, things like that. Especially when you get a company to save thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars because of an idea you thought up that saved time, safety, so on like that. So that's kind of the goal.
I agree. And I agree with you too. Like sometimes students will make you think from a perspective you haven't thought about before. I mean, the go-to thing, like when I first started teaching, it was programming. What got me in the door was we were starting our gaming program here, and Randy reached out and was like, how about you come and adjunct and teach this with me? And kind of like you, at the first year we were team teaching, and then I was the one going to the conferences instead. I was the one being the full teacher, and so I kind of like worked my way in there. But from a programming standpoint, you can develop a program and create it and put it out, and in your mind, it does what it's supposed to do. And the second you have QA, where you bring in users to use it, and you realize, oh, that's not as intuitive as I thought it was, you then have a humbling experience to be like, I need to correct this. And I really like that too, because in the classroom, there's a way it's in my mind, and I can regurgitate that. But it's cool when students give me feedback and say, well, this is the way that I approached it, so that I can try to make sure, if at all possible, I can hit a subject from 3 or 4 different ways to where hopefully in that classroom, there's just not 10% of people that understand things the way I do, and the light bulbs go off for 10%. If I can say the same thing and reach 3, 4, 5 times the people because I'm saying it in the different ways that make the light bulbs go off all over.
Exactly.
That's what you want. You want to figure out the way to be able to reach all the students in the way that you need. And so it's wonderful feedback when they tell you that and you learn that and you're like, you know what? That is a new tool for my tool belt. That's a new way for me to think about it, and how to make sure that I can try to make those light bulb moments go off.
No, that's where you get your enjoyment from it, is seeing that light bulb go off. But again, sometimes you got students that bulb's kind of dim because they're still not getting it, and being able to have that extra time with them to see it how they're seeing it. Sometimes it takes sitting down with them and have them walk you through their thought process. In IT, when we're doing labs and things like that, we do have time sometimes to, while other students are doing certain things, you can get with that one student, and that might be the one thing that's holding them back. That's kind of like why I like the IT field versus English or math or some of the other subjects that are great. But, and like we said, this field changes so fast. We've got to be able to make sure the student knows where the reference material is, how to use that material, because you're not going to be there for them all the time. But if you teach them how to learn, that's what we want.
That's true. Yeah, I think about, like, you were talking like an English class. I don't think an English professor can, like, open your skull and look at your brain and see your thought process on something. But everything in IT, it's got to leave your body. You got to click here. You got to type something here. So I can watch what you're doing. I can watch how you're configuring a router or a switch. So I'm able to see those external impulses, and I can be like, they're getting stuck here on step 4 because that's not a way I mentioned how to do step 4. And yeah, you can help them because it can be frustrating, like you say. And like it's not for lack of trying that student's bulb is dim. They're just, it's not super exciting to come into a place and be frustrated. So you want them to be able to see, like, aha, I know what this is. And then they'll build their confidence, and then they'll want to try more and try more and try more. Many students use the analogy when you come in here, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose just because of so much content. And the thing I always try to tell them is, at the beginning it is, what you're going to find in your second, third, and fourth semester is there's only so many things we can teach you about, and then we have to reinforce and be like, remember that from last semester? This is how this comes together with this, because everything in computers is networked together.
Yes.
No pun intended there.
Yeah,
it all loops back. Like, it is all interconnected, and at first it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, it's driving a car. You've got to learn the basics first, and then you can get a little faster. You can do things with the car that you couldn't do 5 years ago, type of things, and you feel more comfortable with it. And that's kind of where students have to be too. When they leave here in 2 years or 3 years, they've got to have the confidence to go out there and add to it, not stop right here. And that's the main goal, I think.
So I reached out to some students to see if they had any comments or anything they wanted to say, anything would spur thoughts or something. And I heard from, I don't know if you remember Jared Staten, but I heard from Jared. He mentioned here that you used to create a lot of layer 1 issues when having the students set up a lab. He would use a crossover cable instead of a straight through, would disconnect one, would have it plugged in the wrong port, etc. And in networking, the skill to understand layer 1 issues is crucial, as most networking engineers do not sit local to the equipment anymore. A lot of younger kids, and I don't want to tell anyone this, he says, used to make fun of him because they thought he was doing it by accident. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew 100% what he was doing on purpose, because when you have to troubleshoot stuff, you can't troubleshoot it if it's already working. You need to go ahead and troubleshoot things that are expected to work and figure out what the problem is. He should get a lot more credit for this technique than what he did. I never understood him keeping the flash drives, though. I know lots of people would say, oh, man, if I just had all those flash drives he had, I'd have all kinds of stuff.
The thing, first, the layer 1 problems.
Yeah.
Exactly, because at that time you had most people only plugged in Ethernet cable, which was a straight through cable. The reason for the layer 1 problems were I had to show them that in what was output on one computer, if you plugged it into another computer, was on the output of that computer also, it would never be able to talk to the other computer. Our devices, our network devices, routers, switches, and things like that, they flipped those cables over. So the guys that were trying to use an Ethernet cable, you had to show them it didn't work. And then sometimes it could damage the card type thing.
Well, I mean, like a real world example, your I guess it's your dryer at the house, your washer, your dryer. Mm-hmm. It's got a special plug. It's got a 220 plug, and it looks completely different than all the things you plug in your appliances at the house. How crazy would it be if those plugs were not different and you just had to know, oh, this is supposed to be plugged into a special 220 port as opposed to a regular one, like that would be a lot of issues. So from a user, education standpoint, they made it to where the plugs wouldn't work. So if someone was sitting there trying to plug it in, it just wouldn't work. But that's not the same for network cables. A network cable generically might just have a blue outside on it, and it looks like a network cable. Hey, look, here's a hole it can plug in. Here's a hole it can plug in. But like you're saying, one type of cable goes from a switch to a computer. A whole different type goes from a switch to a switch. Depends on what you're doing. And you got to pay attention to, is it the right type of cable? That's a really, really fine, nuanced thing you got to do.
And that's kind of the point with it, and to show them. And we went through making cables, and one of the things we did with making the cables was show the difference and then plug it into the devices, because a console port and a Ethernet port looks exactly the same. And if you plug a straight through cable into a console, it wouldn't work. It's called a roller cable. You got to put it in that one. So, little things like that. So it's allowing them to make the mistakes and then let them work through it and see, I know I'm doing this right, but if they, it's also I think the third chapter of connections and everything like that. It shows a diagram and why and everything like that. So when they came in and just thought they could plug it in, that was kind of the catch. Did you read last night? That type thing. The thing about the USB drives, when USB drives became the factor, before USB drives, I would have them burn a CD. What that was is all their homework that they had, all the handouts that they created or presentations and things, I would have them do that. And each year, as you know, or each semester, we would go back and look at reviews, look at things we did right, what we did wrong. But we also looked at, because I always ask the students, what material did you use to, study for this or find this or something like that? And I always told them, put that on your flash drive. And I would go back after the semester and I would sit down and go through the class, and I would compare, say, a B student with a C student and see, was it their study material? Was it things like that? So, but I'd tell them right up front in the first of the class, get at that time probably a 2 gigabyte flash drive. I said, you're not going to get it back, but you can use this to bring homework to class and things like that. But at the end of the semester, but I gave them the option to burn it to a CD. Right. So,
I know from for us, for out there for people who don't know, we want to make sure we're refining our classes. We want to make sure we are reaching the most people we can. And then also the college expects that. There's an accrediting body called the Higher Learning Commission who double checks that we're just not teaching people how to do underwater basket weaving. We're teaching them skills. And so we have to look at that stuff and be like, what do I need to refine? How did this person get an A and this person not? Is there something I can learn from this? So I'm with you. I mean, these days now, 2026 time, we had the ability to grab that stuff out of Blackboard. But back then, that wasn't as prolific. That wasn't as easy. And then also, what happens if we don't have that Blackboard contract anymore? You lose that stuff. That USB, you're not going to lose it at all.
We was joking with Zane that he found my CDs and everything in my old office and classroom and everything like that. And that was because it wasn't the point of taking the drives from them. Sure. It was a point that there's material for review. Yeah, for learning.
You weren't taking them and formatting them and using them for something else. Yeah. You were actually using their assignments, those artifacts, to prove changes you can make to your class or to prove if something was actually working in your class. Because, we have to do a lot of assessment on the back end with that to prove that our students are getting the skills they need, and we're always trying to constantly improve and refine the classes. So that's a good point. Greg Napier, a friend of Jared's, told me that He didn't necessarily have any funny stories, but he was always just amazed how you seemed to have at least one, often many, of any old tech that ever had existed stored away somewhere and could show it to the students so they would have an idea about legacy devices that might be out in the field.
Yeah, that's kind of I'm known around here as an instructor and everything for if somebody needed something, it would either be in my office or in my classroom. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether it was a paper clip or, any kind of anything. It was just kind of a habit I got to in the military is you plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Sure.
And so I always had redundancy, but I always looked at it from standpoint of legacy devices. Mm-hmm. If they still can be used to do the function that they were for, don't get rid of them. I mean, I've turned computers into secondary devices for the house, things like that. I mean, old 286, 386 type computers. I don't have any of that old now, but I still have, we talked about the original Macintosh. A couple years after I got that one, I was able to get a hold of the original, what they called Lisa. That was the business Mac that came out before the personal Mac. So it was really the original Macintosh computer.
Right.
So I still have that. And I still have a lot of cables and things like that. Now I'm clearing my inventory. I'm past that point now. But I still kind of have a lot of things that memories, but you'll be surprised how many people ask me, do you have this old so I can repair something?
Sure.
And everything like that. You can't even find it out on eBay anymore type stuff. And I probably could have made a mint going up on eBay, but now it costs too much to shipping and everything like that. So mostly I just kind of give it away to people that need it.
Well, in my particular area, since I'm more software than anything with Windows, I'm sure I have a copy of Windows Server 2000 someplace. Mm-hmm. And my wife's probably happy that my area of focus is not so much a hardware because it's easier to store software things these days. Yes. But I will intentionally in class have students install an operating system from the year 2010. And this is 2026. Like I have them install 08R2, and that's their domain controller, and then they have to bring on a 2016. And just last spring, I had a student say, why are we installing an operating system from 2010? And I said, because last semester, one of my students said they went to a client location, and that client is still using this. And I want to make sure when you all go there, and this desktop looks entirely foreign to you, oh, I did that with Patrick's class. You don't look unprofessional and be like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I want to arm you with the tools because, as you said, most businesses, unless they're an IT business, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So they're going to have older operating systems. Now, putting my cybersecurity hat on, that is atrocious when it comes to securing those machines and stuff. But if they have them out there, I would like to at least arm you with the knowledge, at least some knowledge of what that looks like. So when you go out in the field, you can be every bit the professional you are and be like, okay, I've seen that. I know how to use that. And it's a lot of me making sure that, yes, I teach you about the latest and greatest Server 2025, but regardless whether Microsoft wants it or not, tons of people are still using 2019, 2016, 2012. So I want to make sure they can see that and have some familiarity about it because I'm just not teaching to the test up here. I'm teaching to the experience you're going to have when you're out there in field.
That's kind of important because we know what we're looking for, let's say the start menu or something like that. But every time when Microsoft comes out with a new iteration, they move it or how to get to it or even to get the settings. We used to be folders used for our profiles used to be profiles. Now it's people and things like, they changed the names of them and everything like that. And like you said, you go to a customer and you're looking to recover somebody's files, you've got to know what it was called or what it's called to get to it. A good example is somebody called me up, just asked me as a favor, out here at Woodland, the retirement community. One of the people out there had an old computer, had files on it, everything like that, and the operating system became corrupted. Couldn't get it to boot, anything like that. So I had a Huron boot disk.
Oh, yes.
To hook up to it, which basically I had to use either a Linux kind of login or a DOS type boot in. But so the system was so old, I know what the old names of things were to get to the C level, to get to the things that I needed. Those are some of the things that I still wish they would have at least 2 classes on old systems and kind of discuss how would I get into these. And I know Gary tries to do it with his repair class. Because you're not always going to have the newest, greatest operating system. Even though we give it to him here to use and install, he brings in some old operating system and puts on in Linux. And you'd be surprised that by having that little flash drive that had the boot operating system on it, you can get in there and save your files.
My dad has, just 2 weeks ago, my dad has 2 laptops, both have XP. Couldn't remember what the username was. I found he had optical drives still. I found one on my burnt disk of like a Hiron's boot disk, put it in, and you were able to just blank the password for administrator. And so, you could do it on a workstation, simple enough. Can't do it on a domain per se, but it worked. I got in. I fixed it for him. I got his files off there. So, it's a lifesaver to be able to have something like that, to be able to get in there and do that. So that is that's a really good point.
You mentioned about the cybersecurity things.
Mm-hmm.
NTFS, was a thing. You couldn't break into it. You couldn't get into it backdoor, and the guys that knew Linux knew that all we had to do was plug it in a Linux disk and it opened NTFS. Even if it was NTFS, we could still get to the files. And I had to show that in class one time. Nobody believed me when we were doing it. And I said, I plugged it in and showed them all the C drive files, full access, even though it was locked for Windows side of the house to get in. On our side, Linux, and it was just an open source Linux version. I don't think it was Red Hat. It was like Ubuntu. It was one of them that was easily available. It wasn't a hack version that hackers would use. It's just a normal one that anybody just booted up, got the showed them files, and it was like, oh crap! It's not what the book says,
Yeah, it's not what Microsoft says in the book exactly. Yeah. Well, I know. For me, I was thinking about the NTFS there. I had to buy a driver for Mac to allow my Mac to read from that.
Yes.
Because I too end up going down the side of the Macs. My first Mac was an iMac DV Special Edition. Anybody who's seen the ones like the giant TV in a box, that's what it was. One of the original ones. And mine was a dark gray. And I did it because it wasn't that I hated Microsoft or anything, but I was going to go on tour with a local guy in Lavalette. He was a country singer, and the idea was we were going to go on tour, and I was going to edit his webpage. And so that Mac I could just carry by the handle if I needed to. That fell through. But that got me into OS 9, OS 10. I later got bigger Macs. I made a movie at one point and edited the whole thing on my Power Mac, and so my students look at me so oddly when they're like, your entire house is Mac. And what I say is, well, look what a mechanic drives home, because that mechanic does not want to have to work on their car once they get home. So my joke is always, I don't want to have to work on Windows when I get home, so I have a Mac and I don't have to work on it.
Yeah. And that's kind of And people don't understand that with Macs, was the only thing that was available for music and graphics and videos. And
I think
for many years,
Avids were on Mac. Pro Tools was all Mac. Yeah,
everything was there until they came out with faster, smarter chips. Mm-hmm. Was the only time that Windows overtook the Mac side. They could run the software that Mac's had been running for years.
Sure,
and that's what kind of closed the gap. Mm-hmm. I really think if the chip hadn't got faster, then we would still have the two worlds, Macs and Windows.
Well, I mean, you bring that up. I mean, eventually Motorola just couldn't dissipate the heat. G5 was the last one they brought out, right. And that's why eventually Mac switched over to Intel. Right. And it's been a couple of years now, but Mac has actually moved to their own silicon. So they're M1s, M2, M3s. They're
going back now.
But for a long, I mean, so they're doing it in-house now. They're not even dealing with Motorola in that case. But yeah, I have several Intel Macs, which was really cool because I could run Boot Camp, which allowed me to dual boot into Windows if I wanted to.
Yes.
Because back when I had my iMac, I could put Windows 95 on there, but there was a company called Connex, and they had Virtual PC, but it was so slow because it was having to translate what should have been an Intel command into a PowerPC command. Yeah. But yeah, it was really nice when they had the Intels. You could just dual boot into Windows if you needed it, for business, and then go back to your personal. So it was good.
And cost was the main factor when the prices of chips went down, so they could fast chip. Mac made the decision, which I really thought that was the worst decision they could have made, because for many years they were the premier, and I think they could have made their chip better, but when Jobs passed away and everything like that, they made a lot of cost decisions that he would have never made. And like you said, they've learned, they've gone back to making their own chip, and it made a difference. Just like I said, when I was doing the presentations down in Panama, it was because nobody else could produce them. Only a Macintosh could produce them. There was what we would call optical discs in the past. And one of the units I was attached with was military intelligence. And we have GPS now. We have all these other things, maps and so on. But before that, we had optical discs were larger than basically the old LPs type sizes and things like that. Those ran on Macintosh computers. Those were secure SCIF type of devices that were used and things like that. No other processors could handle them, but the Macintosh RISC chips could.
Would that have been technically a worm drive?
It was more just data.
Okay.
The chip ran everything, but this was the images and everything. There was nothing that could process the images. So like we play now, it would take our finger and swiping the screen and moving the map and everything like that. Back then. Now this was during, I was there just before the invasion of Panama. Mm-hmm. And we were doing the mapping and things like that we had to do and all. And that's what made a big difference, I felt.
But to set the timeline, like this is pre-internet.
Yes.
This is older computers. There's no digital cameras. You need some way to be able to have like satellite style maps of where you were at. And that had to be something local. It was SneakerNet. And so you had an optical drive the size of a vinyl record or like a laser disc that had all that information on there.
And that's basically the big laser disc at the time. But they were unique for that purpose and everything like that. So, yeah, I got exposed to different types of computers, and it was always a thing with me. I always wanted to learn the next things, and you knew me as a habit here when I taught here with you. I would go out and just buy something new that because I wanted to learn about it, not whether I needed it. But I always figured that a student or somebody would ask me something about it. So I would want to try it out first and have it. And that's what they were talking about, legacy devices. I'd buy something and use it for what I wanted it for and put it away and then go to the next thing. So it was kind of a habit with me. But, it's kind of like I guess one of the nice terms is pack rat.
Well, there's things I can think back to that I've got some of, but I feel like someone made a thing. I think it was called the Audrey. May have been 3Com. It was this tablet of a device, and I think you had one of those. Mm-hmm. Like I think you had one of Apple's Airport Extremes. Like you had things that I saw that I was like, oh, I'd like to maybe get that one day. And then I was like, oh, Jack's got one. I can play with one and check it out. And it was very cool. But I mean, I was always fascinated by all of the wireless antennas you had. Like I remember hearing stories. I never got to do it, but I remember hearing stories. You would go down to the Huntington side of the Ohio River with an antenna and have somebody else over on the Ohio side of the Ohio River, and you all would send signals with the antennas across the river, because I guess technically FiberNet was doing that back in the day.
Exactly. And Marshall was doing it from, they had but they were using microwaves. From the science building on Marshall's campus down to the Bird Center. That was their internet connection. Oh. And so when I did we forgot, I did the wireless class and got my wireless certifications too. But with the wireless, I wanted to show them that there was other things out there. And the Yagi antennas, so that's what I would have, a student that was from Ohio. So when we met, we would do a class where he would be over there and I'd be over here, and we would send traffic back and forth and everything like that. And I want, because we had one student that, and around here, we had to end the service basic where, the last farm would have, be able to get telephone or cable, but anywhere else on the farm wouldn't get it.
Right.
Or, and sons or daughters would build their house somewhere else on the property, and they were too far out and it cost too much. So we started doing things like with extra equipment that I would have, extra routers. I would teach them how to hook up two routers to talk to each other, put one in the parent's house, put one in the son or daughter's house, and then hook up two Yagi antennas, and parents had the internet, so the way they could do their work is they would communicate back and forth and use the parents until eventually, they would get service or something out there. But I had students that probably took 2 or 3 years before they could get any service or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they were trying to they were trying to work. So I was trying to work out problems that they had, real world problems. And it wasn't a business. But it was affecting the student. So, and probably I did it for this one student, and it probably, I kept having people come and ask me about how did I do that? And we would do it in the wireless class. This is how you would do it. This is what you need. It's cost you $13 on eBay to buy a Yagi antenna. You just had to worry about what frequency and things like. So we went through why we did it and how we did it. And they learn more from that than, just the basic course.
Sure.
And everything like that. So it kind of worked out. It was enjoyable.
Well, the last student I heard from, I reached out to Trey Balzer, and I was like, hey, anything you want me to tell Jack? And he sent me a screenshot, and he goes, well, you can tell him that one of his former students is now a CCIE. So he recently took his CCIE and passed both parts. So,
and that's, I think, going beyond what I did, but I was focused on getting the certifications for training. I didn't go because I wasn't leaving here type thing.
Sure.
But to know the students started and then continued on and didn't fall out. We always had a good your program, my program. we always had a good rate of the people that graduated with it that, they got jobs. It took a while because, just like in graphic art, there's only so many jobs in networking and administration. But a lot of companies now have needs of an administrator or a network person that didn't need it in the past. They see it as a need. And so we're opening up to a lot of the jobs. And I think that's going to open up a lot. And just from the year and a half, 2 years I've been gone, I can see a lot of changes here. And you've grown a lot since I've left and everything like that. Just the podcast, the ability to talk to students that, aren't even in the state. They're away. And that's what I wish I would have had in the military, is some way of getting the classes I wanted or needed. Because being overseas and things like that, it's hard for instructors to come to our base and things like that. Coming to Panama to teach classes and just didn't go too much. So, but yeah, I wish I could be teaching right now, again, but it's just not possible. But but I'm glad the students that we had are growing, and I think they will continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like it's we plant the seeds, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and they grow into trees, to borrow a weird metaphor, and then the fruit drops off them and they plant more seeds. And so we're kind of like passing it on to them going ahead and inspire somebody else on down the line. So,
think about how many students that we've had in the past are now teaching here or have taught specialty classes. And it might not have been exactly in the field that they came here for. It's something they learned that's, whether it's drones, for example, or, GPS, any of those fields that are specialized, but we bring them back to teach this generation a student. And I just hope we can continue to do that. But I think with the way you've got everything set up, I think that's going to continue to happen and probably grow.
I think so. Well, Jack, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. I just always find it very interesting how people's trajectory goes through, and people could be like, oh, I have that same problem. Look where he's at. I just feel like there can be so much of an imposter syndrome. I think the people, when they have the imposter syndrome, they do forget that everyone had to start somewhere. And like you were saying earlier, failure is success training. Like you need to fail. And when you fail, you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Yeah. But that's how you figure it out. And so those are all great things for people to hear from where we are up here, and they feel like they're down here and they're like, I'm never going to get there. You will, but it's one step at a time, and practice.
But how many of the students that we just talked about started down there? Yeah. And
everyone does.
And they thought, I can't do that. And now they're at the PM, they've exceeded us, per se. And, but yeah, I'm just glad that 25 years from now, they'll think back about how they started and pass it on.
Exactly. Well, thank you, sir.
Appreciate everything. See you guys.